So the ATF has submitted their arguments for why the Supreme Court must take up their bump stock ban and uphold it. So let's talk about this. But before we get deeper into this content, I want to thank the sponsor of this video, which is Surfshark. Surfshark is a VPN service that allows you to encrypt your IP address. And in today's world, there are many reasons why you might want to have a VPN. A VPN keeps you safe and private by covering up your online location. When your device connects to the internet, almost all of your information can be made available, but with something like Surfshark, that's all blurred out. Anyone who tries to snoop in on you won't be able to see your location. They won't be able to see where you're at, where your IP is. And so it's just one of those tools that helps to protect your online information and protect you online. Plus, there is the added benefit that using Surfshark allows you to access content that maybe you otherwise traditionally wouldn't be able to get with your US IP. By switching your IP to a different country like Canada or the UK, you can get access to different content on different streaming platforms, for example, Netflix. And personally, that is what I use Surfshark for the most. A lot of times I get tired of seeing the same old movies and shows on Netflix. So what I'll do is I'll just switch my IP location to Canada or the UK, and then all of a sudden I have a bunch of new shows and movies that I can watch. If you're interested, you can check out Surfshark using the link down below. You can find that in the description section and then also in the pinned comment. Also, you can use this QR code here on the screen. And if you sign up for the 24-month program and you use the code ARMED, you can get 3 extra months for free. So I can't recommend Surfshark enough. I use it pretty much every single day now. And again, make sure you use the link down in the description section in the pinned comment or the QR code and use that code ARMED. And again, thank you to Surfshark for sponsoring this video. As I mentioned in the intro, in this video, we're going to be discussing the arguments that the ATF put forward for why the Supreme Court must review the Cargill lawsuit and ultimately protect their rule on bump stocks. As many of you know, we received a major Second Amendment win coming out of the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals. The Fifth Circuit en banc panel ruled in the Cargill v. Garland case that the ATF's final rule on bump stocks is in fact invalid. This decision struck a major blow to the ATF's current overreach and ultimately their claimed authority. In this important decision, the Fifth Circuit en banc panel found that the definition of a machine gun as outlined in the NFA and GCA does not apply to bump stocks. Therefore, the Fifth Circuit vacated the lower court's decision and remanded it back down to the district court to enter a judgment in favor of the plaintiffs. This decision had major implications not just for bump stocks, but also for other ATF overreach like their rule on frames and receivers, their pistol brace ban, and also the new rule that they're going to try to put in place in regards to private party transactions. Because of how important this case was, the ATF decided that they could not let this stand. So they decided to file an appeal up to the Supreme Court and seek Supreme Court review. Now, one of the important aspects of this challenge was whether Chevron deference should be given to the ATF in relation to their final rule on bump stocks, or whether a different rule called the rule of lenity should be used instead. If you're not aware of what Chevron deference refers to, Chevron deference is a term coined after the landmark case referring to the doctrine of judicial deference given to administrative actions. Generally, for an agency to be given Chevron deference, the agency's interpretation of an ambiguous statute must be rational or reasonable. Now, in contrast to Chevron deference, there is a different rule called the rule of lenity. And the rule of lenity indicates that when dealing with criminal statutory interpretation, a court is required to apply any unclear or ambiguous law in a way that is most favorable to the people who may be subject to the criminal convictions, not the enforcement agency. Now, in a 13-3 decision, the en banc panel in the Fifth Circuit found that the ATF overstepped its authority in regulating bump stocks as machine guns under the GCA. The Fifth Circuit stated in their opinion that a plain reading of the statutory language paired with a close consideration of the mechanics of a semi-automatic firearm reveals that a bump stock is excluded from the technical definition of machine gun set forth in the GCA and NFA. They also went on to state that the ATF's rule violated the principles of tenderness of the law towards the rights of individuals. There they're hinting at the rule of lenity. In regards to this tenderness of law, the Fifth Circuit stated that indeed the government would outlaw bump stocks by administrative fiat, even though the very same agency routinely interpreted the ban on machine guns as not applying to the type of bump stocks at issue here. Nor can we say that the statutory definition unambiguously supports the government's interpretation. As noted above, we conclude that it unambiguously does not. But even if we are wrong, the statute is at least ambiguous in this regard. And if the statute is ambiguous, Congress must cure that ambiguity, not the federal courts. In that decision, the en banc panel in the Fifth Circuit clearly identified that the definition of a machine gun in the GCA and NFA does not include items like bump stocks. If Congress or the ATF wants that definition of machine gun to include items like bump stocks, then the burden is for Congress to change the language in the statute, but the ATF does not have the power to do that on their own. Now, after the Fifth Circuit issued their decision striking down the bump stock ban, the ATF decided, of course, to file a review of the Supreme Court because they could not let that stand because that compromises all of their future rules and the rules that they're currently trying to put in place and enforce, like pistol braces and frames and receivers. Now, in the petition, the ATF puts forward their arguments for not only why the Supreme Court should review this case, but also why the Supreme Court should agree with their interpretation and uphold bump stocks should be banned as machine guns. In the support of their position, the ATF states that the petition demonstrates that the Fifth Circuit's decision is inconsistent with the decisions of several other circuit courts, which have rejected challenges to the same interpretive rule at issue in this case. They go on to say that since they filed their petition to the Supreme Court, some things have also changed. They state that this conflict has even grown even more because of a recent decision out of the Sixth Circuit, and that was the Hardin decision. They state that the Sixth Circuit's decision in Hardin underscores the need for this court's review. As respondent recognized, it is not tenable to have a regime in which the sale of possession of bump stocks are outlawed in some circuit courts while permitted in others. Not only do the Fifth and Sixth Circuit's decisions undermine the uniformity of federal law, they also undercut the practical effect of decisions by other courts rejecting analogous challenges. They state that bump stocks manufactured and sold in the Fifth Circuit, in the Sixth Circuit, will predominantly find their way to other parts of the entire country, is what they're arguing. The question presented is also exceptionally important, they argue, because bump stocks, like other machine guns, pose, and they believe in their viewpoint, acute dangers to the public and also law enforcement, even though there's really no evidence that that is anything really that's happening. So in this case, both sides are asking for Supreme Court review. They're asking for the Supreme Court to grant cert and take up this case. Both argue that there are varying decisions in multiple circuit courts that have come to different conclusions. One of the most recent decisions that both of these sides point to is the Hardin decision that came out of the Sixth Circuit. The Hardin decision was a huge win. We've covered it here on the channel, but the Sixth Circuit came to the conclusion that this rule is invalid in a different way than the Fifth Circuit came to the same conclusion. In Cargill, the Fifth Circuit en banc panel found that the text of the NFA and GCA was clear and that the plain text expressly did not include bump stocks as machine guns. Then later in the same opinion, they went on to say that, well, even if the term was ambiguous in some way, you would use the rule of lenity, not Chevron deference. In the Sixth Circuit Hardin case, the court started from the position that the term in the statute is in fact ambiguous, and therefore they moved on to see what type of doctrine should be used to clear up that ambiguity. They ultimately decided that they should use something like the rule of lenity and not use Chevron deference. And ultimately, the Sixth Circuit concluded that the rule of lenity must be used in this situation, and that meant that obviously the Pro 2A side won because the rule of lenity would cut against the ATF's interpretation. And that is what's led to both of these sides now seeking Supreme Court review. Now, in response, the ATF actually pushes back against adding the rule of lenity into a question in this case. They don't want necessarily the Supreme Court to focus specifically on the rule of lenity. They believe that the question presented to the Supreme Court in their original petition would cover that issue without expressly stating it. So it's really interesting that both sides want review. They want review in different ways. The ATF is already kind of fighting back against the express review of the rule of lenity. They believe that they can maybe avoid that, but it's going to be interesting to see how this proceeds forward, and especially because we do have Pro 2A wins in the Fifth Circuit and the Sixth Circuit, even though they came to the conclusion in different ways, and you have a variety of different opinions from circuit courts who have addressed this issue. There are conflicting opinions now, which the Supreme Court loves, and then also what's interesting for the Supreme Court is that since the Fifth Circuit en banc panel struck down this law, if the Supreme Court does not grant review to this case, then that ruling in the Fifth Circuit en banc panel would sit as precedent in the Fifth Circuit, again, further meaning that the ATF could not enforce the bump stock ban in the Fifth Circuit, and then also potentially the Sixth Circuit, and anywhere else there are those types of decisions. So without the Supreme Court stepping in, there will be some dramatic differences in the federal law and what the ATF can do. So in my opinion, I think the Supreme Court won't be able to avoid this. They're going to have to take up this case, even more so now with the variety of opinions and the variety of decisions. But of course, if we get any more information, I will let you all know. Also, if you like this video and you'd like to support the channel, one of the best ways to do that is to like, comment, and subscribe. All those things help to fuel the algorithm, and it signals to YouTube that you guys see value in these videos and in this type of 2A news. As always, I want to thank everybody who likes, comments, subscribes, who hits the notification bell, who shares these videos. You guys are directly impacting these videos, impacting this channel, and helping me to reach and educate more people than I could ever do on my own. So as always, thank you all for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And never forget, this nation was built by armed scholars, and this nation will be maintained by armed scholars.